Welcome back to our discussion of HTML, this time HTML forms. So our reference, search web forms working with user data, MDN, there's the URL. So forms are the central way for user-entered data to be communicated back to the server. And we'll see that with some examples. So here's our HTML form element, and here's the resulting form on the page. So this form ends here, so it has an end tag at the end of the form, and then the controls go within it, and they follow a certain pattern. But those are the controls you see, the labels and the controls you see on the page over here. Let's go over the form itself for a bit. So the form has two important attributes. It has several attributes, but two are really important: the action and the method. So the action, with this, the form's primary job is to organize the user input data for submission back to the server. The server needs to know what this information is about and what are the individual field names. So the server gets that really information by providing a handler, in this case a handler research called MyHandlingForm page. And we'll see what happens when we post this data to the MyHandlingForm page, which doesn't exist on our server. But our method is post. So that's known as an HTTP verb. It's an action in HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And we've seen several of them. In fact, as this page was loaded, here are the HTTP verbs. I've loaded the pages several times. These gets are actually reads from the server, read requests from the server. The browser wakes up, has a server URL, asks for index.html. The server replies, I have that, or I don't have that. That's an HTTP GET request coming from the browser, and the response is the associated HTML. Either it finds it or it doesn't. And that's the HTTP GET verb. This is an example of the HTTP POST verb. So the GET is the read, and the POST is the write. In this case, we're submitting this information for the server to consume. The very first element that we see inside the form is a very important element, actually, for organization. It's the unordered list. We can also use ordered lists. Very common in this case, in cases like this, where you want to have a statement, a semantic statement, that these items belong together. And they can be used for any purpose. Now, we haven't styled the resulting. This is the raw form in all its non-CSS glory. And so you see the bullet items that are coming from the unordered list here. But you can style those away, but you have this nice organization of related items: unordered list, list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, etc. That's an expression that these things are closely related together. And you also have two handy tags that can be easily styled from CSS. The list itself and the list item can be styled in CSS quite conveniently using those elements. The next thing we see on in the HTML are two element types that are related to each other: the label and the input. So the label is associated with the input, and you can see it over here. This label to input semantically tied, and they're semantically tied through this. The for attribute on the label ties it with this ID here. So since this is always an ID in the for, this attribute setting, you don't have to put a hashtag in front of it. It knows it's an ID, and it associates it with this unique element on the page, this input type. This label with association makes it easier for us to navigate the page, because you can click on the labels themselves, and they go to and the browser knows to go to the associated input label. It's also good for screen readers, because the screen reader can read the name of the form and then the name of the input fields as the user who is using the screen reader navigates down the form. So useful labels, good for both sighted and unsighted readers. So all the other important attributes of the input type are shown here. Here's a type, and this creates the type of control. So there's many different types of controls. Text is one of them, and it's for simple text entry here. And you can see there's our text entry control called for here. We've already gone over the ID, and then the name. The name is important, because the name is the name of the data field for client-server communication. So each one of these form inputs become a data field to the server when this information is submitted to the server. So you'll have key value pairs. This is the name of the data, and here's the data. The server knows how to associate that and then store it in the server's database mechanisms. So not only is the form organizing our data for display in the browser, it's also organizing our data for communication back to the server. So the list item ends then, and then the other list item is another label input pair. So that's a common pattern. And really the only important difference is for this input type, it's email. So there'll be some local error correction for the validity of an email address, and you can buff that up and get it to be quite strong. Going down to our next control, we'll see this is a difference. It's a text area. It's also requires an end tag, and that's where you can put default text here. The input tag is actually a self-closing tagger. That is, it has null element. It has null content, so it doesn't have an end tag. And text area could be a type, but it's not. It just means a multiple line text area, and you can make it into a little text editor. You put scroll bars in it, and whatever your needs are. You can also change the default height and width of it. So you have quite a lot of control there for a multi-line text editor. The next element in the form and embedded within the paragraph tags is the actual button submit. So this will actually submit the form to the user, the form to the server, given this address, and we'll see the address that's defined up here for the browser. There we go, the browser. And we'll hit that button next and see what happens. So I hit the send button, and we have a post. And this post replied, I don't have it. 404 is actually an HTTP error status that says I don't have that resource. So this is the result in the browser. Cannot post this. But you can see that it's been wired for the relatively simple form attributes. It's been wired already to bundle that data up and send it to the server, and that's what it was attempting to do. The server replies, I don't have a handler for that, and this is what occurs. Later on, we'll take a look at all this chatter that's going on between the page and the server, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to use Light Server, so we could see this actual client-server interaction happening here. All right, we'll look at some more elaborate forms next.